Check if it works.
Yeah. Now we are.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone, and sorry to keep you waiting, those of you who are online. Yep. Okay, so once again, thank you very much for coming today, and I know it's a hot day and many of you decided to stay at home rather than coming to the building. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Yaqub Ahmed. I am a researcher here at the Institute, and one of the things I wanted to say before we start is to continuously observe our Twitter page to see the sort of activities and talks we are having at the centre. Today I am extremely pleased to have not only a colleague but a dear friend of mine, Dr. Issam Eido. I never thought that there would be an opportunity for me to be side by side sitting with him, and here we are, Allah has his ways. So, Dr. Issam Eido is a former visiting professor of Islamic studies narrative from the University of Chicago Divinity School. Dr. Issam's research focuses on the Quran, antiquity, Hadith studies, Sufism. In particular, he's looking at also on Hanafism. Currently, he's resided in the United States of America at Vanderbilt University. Another thing which I think is important to remind people in regards to Issam's qualifications, he studied in Damascus under Sheikh Eido, and it's always important, I feel, to remind people of the teachers that they have studied under, so that Allah Ta'ala can provide the barakah to the teachers as well as the students who have studied under them. So in that sense, it's really important for me to just provide you that small bit of tidbit information. Okay, so before I take up too much of Issam's time, Issam, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, my apologies.
Thank you, Dr. Yaqub, for inviting me for this amazing place, beautiful place and institution here in Istanbul. I cannot expect a place this sort of this market to find inside indoor. So, alhamdulillah, that's, I think that something like you can expect here in Istanbul, between these modern places and these old places. So, as Dr. Yaqub mentioned, so this something I'm interested in, and I'm coming to this topic from my specialization, which is Hadith studies. So I used to study legal theory and Islamic legal or Islamic jurisprudence, but the main focus of my research on Hadith, and when I was affiliated with a program in Islamic law at Harvard University, so people just like taught me how to connect Hadith to Islamic law. So I found a very interesting thing in the history of Hanafi school, what I called Asl, and this Asl becoming later, as you will see later. So Asl used from Al-Azz bin Abd al-Salam, and later this like from medieval era to our modern time used as Ashbah al-Nata'ir, Furuq, Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya, Al-Qawa'id al-Shar'iyya. But just like in, maybe in English we say legal canons, legal principles, or legal maxims, but the origin of all of these legal maxims started with Hanafi school. And just always like when I teach Hadith and Hanafi fiqh, I said Hanafi school did everything in the beginning, and then they just have a seat and watching others doing all of these stuff, like legal maxims, hadith, and usul al-fiqh. They did their job and then just like took a risk. So as you can see here in the topic, the title Asl, and this like the second letter is missing in the announcement, in the flyer. It's just like S, but some people asking me what is ASL. So this Asl, and the plural is Usul, right? And Usul is a word shared with many genres, like Usul al-Fiqh, Usul al-Hadith, Usul al-Kalam, أصول and القواعد الفقهية as we. But here الأصل as criteria for Hadith criticism, analysis of early Hanafi writings. So just like before starting, we know that in Muslim academia, so nothing can come from nowhere. So there are many secondary sources just to provide before going and talking and giving some details. So there are some works on Hanafism or Hanafi studies, maybe from the perspective of legal theory or Hadith or the Qada and the legal theory. So just to mention some, this is not exclusive list. So the first one, Murtada Badr, the first one who is mostly addressing the same subject I'm talking right now, an early response to Shafi'i, Isa bin Aban on the prophetic report, Khabar. And the second and the third one coming from a researcher did her work at Harvard University. The first one, the history of an Islamic school of law, the early spread of Hanafism, and the second one, semi-Hanafis and Hanafis biographical sources. So this is a very important work working on the history of judgeship, and the judge and their regions in the history of Islam. And the fourth one is a very important dissertation, Salman Yunus from the UK, the Hanafi school, a study of its social and legal dimensions. This is in the 3rd and 4th Islamic century, this 8th and 9th and 10th Islamic century. This is a very important stage in the history of Islam, because that time we can talk about the canonization of 4 Islamic schools, al-Madhahib al-Sunnah. So this work relates to a work written by Christopher Milchart, working on the Ahl al-Hadith and Ahl al-Ra'i. So, and the canonization of the 4 Islamic schools. And then another work coming from Suhail Hanif, also a PhD at Oxford University, a theory of early classical Hanafism, authority, rationality, tradition, and the Hidayah of Burhan al-Din Ali bin Abi Bakr al-Marginani, or al-Marginani, this in 5th Islamic century. And this another stage, you see it's mostly like here is a chronological order. The first one, Nurid Safrir, mostly working on the very early, Dr. Badr, like more earlier than Safrir, and then Salman Yunus after, Suhail Hanif after, in the medieval time, in the 5th Islamic century, in Burhan al-Din al-Marginani and al-Hidayah. And then when we move to medieval and late history Hanafis, here mostly I'm not, my focus on not on that time, I'm focusing on the early period. So here we can see a difference, or maybe another wave in Hanafi school, how the Al-Kutub al-Sitta, the 6 canonical books, affected Hanafi school. So because after the canonization of Islamic, of these 6 books, everything changed. And especially we can see that in Hanafi school, how they justify their legal theory after these 6 canonical books. The first book, I think a lot of you, maybe all of you aware of all of these books, Baber Johansen on the Egyptian Hanafism, and then Talal al-Azam, and also on Oxford on Qutl Bugha, al-Tasheeh, wa-Tarjih, Sami Ayyub on Hanafism at the time of the Ottoman Empire, and then Quran on Hanafism in the early modern Ottoman Empire. And something like very recent, this Hanafi journal studies, I think the first journal on this madhab. So maybe we can see another wave like Shafi'i journal, Maliki journal, or Hanbali journal. This initiated by some people at Harvard, Oxford, and me, and we have mostly focusing on Hanafi school articles. So I invite everyone here to write to this journal. So you can write in Arabic, in English. I'm not sure about Turkish, because the people right now just can edit and read in Arabic and English. So we published and issued the first. We published the first issue, and now we are working on the second one. And I think this is very successful because Hanafi school we don't speak about just like al-madhab al-fiqhi. Okay, we talk about the maturity and we talk about the social aspect, geographical aspect. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah. So, okay, so let me, so just remind me. Okay, so let us begin with just like with my topic. So as we know, like when we talk about hadith studies in the traditions, the main gate, the main entrance, the main principle to criticize any hadith is al-adala, is moral uprightness. So if any narrator has moral uprightness and then he is successful and he can enter the market of transmission and everything is okay. And this everything related or pertaining to adala, the moral uprightness, is coming from isnad angle. So then everything based on isnad angle. And then we have this binary discussion between riwayah and amal. So riwayah and amal, riwayah, transmission versus amal, practice. In the early period of hadith scholarship, so they had to do this, and they made this division between diraya and riwayah. So that time, when we see any faqih in the early period, in the formative period, any faqih, so we cannot expect any faqih without hadith, without isnad. So no faqih in the formative period without isnad, without haddathana, without akhbarana, without an'ana. But maybe we can expect a muhaddith without fiqh in the early period. But mostly riwayah and amal in the first, second to the third century combined and like coming as a package. But then we can witness diraya, specifically this diraya, which used to be just understanding, becoming a technical term under hadith. Like here, the principles of transmissions. So diraya moved from the realm, from the field of fiqh to the realm and the field of hadith. So I'm becoming understanding and applying the principles of transmissions. So then this, like the division between riwayah and amal, has its own trajectory among hadith scholars. But when you come to just like to study hadith as epistemology, not just like from the angle of the Ahl al-Hadith, so we can see like a different wave. In the early history of Islam, so mostly hadith studies studied under what we call right now epistemology. So nothing related to the adala and uprightness, related to how we justify our knowledge, right? So when I'm here in Istanbul, I'm new to Istanbul, I just want to get to this place, right? How I can rely on people in the street to come to this place. So what's the conditions? What I need to put just like to come to this place. So there are many discussions in this epistemology, and especially in our modern times, this in the philosophy department right now in the Western scholarship called epistemology of testimony, how we justify our knowledge. So when we go to the second and the third Islamic century, mostly we can see the scholar that time working on that question, how we justify our knowledge. And for Hanafi school and Mu'tazili school, they provided the most important foundations on justification or justifying our knowledge. And all the tools that gave us coming from not isnad. So I call this non-isnadic tools. So they did not rely on isnad, they did not rely on narrators. They depend on something like different from isnad, something like I'm going to explain. So then, and riwayah and amal in all of these, like madhahib, Hanafi and Mu'tazili and sometimes Maliki, riwayah and amal, so preserved and remain same from the early period to our modern time. So when we approach hadith, we need to see the applied aspect of the hadith. It's not just like hadith, something like we narrate. We need to see what the scope and what the hadith can occupy in the society. So then, just like, let me share with you the initial internal viewpoint. So the thing that made Hanafi unique, Hanafi school unique from different, is two things: the public places and courts. The public places and court. So they are not just like in mosques. So they used to be judges. They used to be in the public places. And these two things made them to create or maybe to rely on something I call lived law or lived report. Something like hayy is not something like we read. If we are relying on something, something should be practiced in the society. So this very, I think, small for the audience, but if anyone interested, I can share with you. This is something I worked on from Hanafi biographical dictionaries for like days and weeks until I trace all Hanafi figures from the first circle of Abu Hanifa till Sadr al-Sharia, the medieval time, the 8th and maybe 9th century. And maybe this, I don't know if you recognize any name, but just like let me go with colors, like here Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani. So this special route, very important in terms of asl, in terms of criticizing hadith. So all of these people criticizing hadith, but these people, Zufar, Abu Yusuf, Muhammad bin Hassan, the main figures who engaged in criticizing hadith and provided non-Islamic tools. And let us take the route of Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani going to Isa bin Aban, his student. And Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani wrote a book called Al-Hujjah. Al-Hujjah ala Ahl al-Madina, the argument with Ahl al-Madina, the people of Medina. And the main narrator of Al-Hujjah is Isa bin Aban. Isa bin Aban wrote many treatises, many monographs on hadith criticism. And he criticized al-Shafi'i, he criticized others in his book Al-Hujjaj al-Kubra, Al-Hujjaj al-Sughra. Nothing was preserved, so everything lost. However, all the writings of Isa bin Aban preserved with Abu Bakr al-Jassas later. But we don't have any evidence right now. Like we call this like the writing of Isa bin Aban. Maybe you can correct me, I'm here in the land of Hanafism. So Isa bin Aban has a student, Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid. So we need to know that Muhammad bin Hassan was a judge. And Isa bin Aban was a judge. And Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid was the judge of judges. So Qadi al-Qudat. And Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid, we don't have anything from him in fiqh, usul or hadith, but he wrote something like called Adab al-Qadi. And from Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid, we can see al-Tahawi, a very important figure. Okay, was not judge, but he engaged in hadith criticism, as you will see later. And then from al-Tahawi, from Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid, we have two figures. The first one, Abu Hassan al-Karkhi, who wrote on usul. And then we have al-Tahawi, who wrote on hadith criticism. And then from Abu Hassan al-Karkhi, we have a student, Abu Bakr al-Jassas. As you know, he wrote al-Fusul fi al-Usul and Ahkam al-Quran and other books. So from al-Jassas, we can trace Isa bin Aban writing. And then, after Abu al-Jassas, we have Abu Ja'far al-Usturushani. And mostly we don't have anything from him, but he is like someone connect between these two figures, between Abu Bakr al-Jassas and then Abu Zayd al-Dabbusi. The one who provided or who shared with us maybe the most important technical terms all Hanafi after him rely on, called Usul al-Qiyas. Usul al-Qiyas. So here is another version, this is an English version of these figures. English figures the same, but it's like in English, that's one in Arabic. So here also we can see a graph drawing to start to trace the history of these figures as judges, and we can see the first one, the first period here. The first period here is just like we don't see anything, but then the first period here, everything controlled by Hanafi scholars. These Hanafi scholars occupy the public spaces as judges. So from 166 to 270, mostly 1 century, you don't see anyone in the courts except Hanafis. Abu Yusuf, Zufar, and the whole circle of Hanafi school. And then from 270 and after, we can see new faces. We can see new faces. And the first new faces is Ibn Surayj, al-Shafi'i, called like the one who revived or the canonized Shafi'i method. When Abu Bakr bin Surayj died 919, decided to be judge, his colleague Ibn Khayran al-Baghdadi said to him, this type of job is not the job of our madhab. Is this like something like related to Hanafi school? Okay, so let us not to go to that market, judgeship. But Abu Bakr bin Surayj did not listen to his colleague and then became judge and opened this type of work, craftsmanship among Shafi'i scholars. And after that, we can see many new faces, many Shafi'i faces in the public places. After that, Maliki. Shafi'i, then Maliki, and then later Hanbali. Right? And then here you can see different colors here. So every color here represents every school. The first one, Maliki, this color Maliki, and then Hanafi, and then Shafi'i, and then other schools, Zahiri, Shi'i, Jariri, Mu'tazili. So, but we can see the first color coming from Hanafi school. Okay, this like from 150 to 200, this the Islamic calendar. And then you can see from 200 to 250, yes, we have Hanafi and others, like coming from Shafi'i and other schools. And from 250 to 300, Hanafi, and then we can see Shafi'i. And then you can see from 300 to 350, mostly the color of Hanafi very like faded. And we can see, and then mostly judges coming from other schools. So these, as I mentioned earlier, the Hanafi school because being in public places, they found themselves, it's very hard to them just to rely on any narrator. They found different tools that help them how to examine any prophetic report, any hadith. And these 5 non-Islamic tools, I'll come later to this slide, but just like to present what are the tools that Hanafi school provide. So the first one in Arabic, الكتاب الذي لا يحتمل المعاني أو الكتاب الذي لا يحتمل التأويل. Maybe the translation, I don't know if you have a better translation, unequivocal Quranic text. Not just like Quranic text, should be unequivocal, قطعي. Right? There's no any doubt. Okay, محكم, قطعي. And then the second one, established sunnah. Sunnah ثابتة. So however, this qualifier ثابتة changed with other schools. Some of them said sunnah ma'rufa, others said sunnah qati'a. Okay, Mu'tazili school said sunnah qati'a or sunnah mujma' alayha, agreed upon sunnah, but the Hanafi term is sunnah thabita. And then we have public matters, umum al-balwa. So how we can, what's the content? What's the connection between the content of the hadith and the public places? Does this hadith connect or maybe relate to public places or just address maybe a family, or what's the sign, what's the scope of the hadith? And then the fifth non-Islamic tool, practice of first generation. And here a very important technical term provided by Hanafi, ash-shadh. The people who studied usul al-fiqh, hadith, I think they are aware about the concept ash-shadh. In hadith, ash-shadh is mostly a contradiction between a narrator and another narrator. It's internal contradiction. Hanafi school, who coined this technical term before muhaddithin, said a contradiction between hadith and Quran or sunnah thabita is external contradiction, not internal contradiction. So then Hanafi school till the 2nd century used this type of shudud until Ash-Shafi'i came and he said a shudud, something like related to a contradiction between a narrator and another narrator. It's just like in hadith, not between hadith, Quran and sunnah. And then the last one, necessary rational conclusions, is mujibat ahkam al-uqul. And the people who studied usul al-fiqh, kalam, is not about just like rational, not reasoning. It should be necessary. Something, if you don't use, you will be like a dilemma, a problem. You cannot do it, or you cannot fix or solve the problem without using necessary rational conclusion. Here is another chart, just maybe showing us how courts, canons, and usul al-qiyas work together. All of these will be explained later, usul al-qiyas and canons. But all of these work together through these figures. Abu Hanifa, the first one, we know, as you know from his biography, he refused to be judge, right? But he predicted, he said, my circle will be becoming judges, okay? And I prepare them for that craftsmanship. And then he is right, so two of his main students, Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani and Abu Yusuf, became judge, and Zufar, I don't see anyone like maybe put in his biography or wrote on his biography that he used to be judge. So, however, Zufar, I put just subtitle under every name. Zufar has something like unique debate on al-asl. I'll share with you the story of Asl and this debate on Asl. And then Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani, as a judge, in his book Al-Hujjah, he presented a very important type of fiqh based on consequences, coherence, and canons. And then the last one is the first stage, Abu Yusuf, Qadi al-Qudat, who the one coined the concept of shadh. Again, the concept of shadh in that circles mean a hadith contradict with Quran and Sunnah. And from the first stage, going to the 2nd stage, Isa bin Aban used to be judge, and he is a student of Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani, and the main narrator of his book Al-Hujjah. Isa bin Aban, as I said, he was a judge. He wrote many books refuting other view, specifically Ash-Shafi'i, and also he was a transmitter. He used to be muhaddith, and then he got to know Hanafi school, and specifically Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani, and then he changed his mind from hadith, and changed his field from hadith to fiqh. Based on Abu Bakr al-Jassas, it seems Isa bin Aban used the word tahkim al-usul. Tahkim al-usul. I think later we will discuss these technical terms. And from Isa bin Aban, his student Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid, he wrote Adab al-Qadi, and he also was Qadi al-Qudat. His circle produced two figures. The first one al-Tahawi, and the second one al-Karhi. Al-Karhi penned a brief treatise on usul. And in his usul, we trace the main foundations to criticize hadith are two, Quran and Sunnah. Tahawi, in his book Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, he wrote and he coined a very important technical term called al-nazar. And after mentioning the hadith, after citing the hadith and discussing the hadith from Isnad, and then he said, wal-nazar. And the nazar is an umbrella for many tools to criticize hadith. Al-Kawthari, Shaykh Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari, received the technical term al-nazar in a different way, and he said, we need to understand al-nazar as a concept al-asl al-jami', a comprehensive canon, a comprehensive foundation. So then, al-asl al-jami', a technical term by Zahid al-Kawthari, al-nazar, a technical term by al-Tahawi. And from al-Karhi, we can see al-Jassas. Al-Jassas, the first one in that route who refused to be judge. I think the decline of this job in Hanafi school started from Abu Bakr al-Jassas. And also he used this word, tahkim al-usul. So relying on usul. And from Abu Bakr al-Jassas, we can see Abu Ja'far al-Surushani. He did not write anything, but as I said, he is a joint, like a connection between al-Jassas and Abu Zayd al-Dabusi, who used this technical terms, al-usul al-qiyas. This, an asl evolution coming from Abu Hanifa, is just like more elaboration, more clarification for the previous slide. We can see Zufar, he debates on asl, al-Shaybani, he used canons and interpretive tools. Abu Yusuf coined shuzuz concept, and then Isa bin Aban, the main narrator of Hujjah, and then his student Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid, judge of judges, al-Qadi al-Qudat. And then here I added another figure. In the previous slide I put just al-Tahawi and al-Karhi. And al-Karhi produced in his treatise 39 asl. That's a specific number for his usul. His colleague Abu Tahir al-Dabbas, the student of Abu Khazim, he presented 17 asl. 17 asl, al-Karhi 39 asl. And then from al-Karhi we can see al-Jassas, he used the word asl in his book al-Fusul fil Usul, and also in his book Sharh Mukhtasar al-Tahawi, a commentary on Mukhtasar al-Tahawi. And then Abu Zayd al-Dabusi, Usul al-Qiyas, and then he wrote, as you know, his book Ta'sis al-Nazar. So some said he was not the writer of that book. Some people here in Turkey working on that topic, and maybe, I don't know when we will see the work, but also they said his book is not Ta'sis al-Nazar. His book, Ta'sis al-Nadha'ir. And this is completely different. Because al-Nadha'ir is a plural for Nadhir. And Nadhir means similarity. And al-Nadhar means perspective. So as you will see later, there's a difference between these. So this is the first story coming from Ibn Abi al-Awwam in his book Fadail Abu Hanifa wa Akhbaruhu wa Manaqibuhu. talking how asl used in the early circle of Hanafi school. So as we know that Hanafi school used to live and to spread in Kufa. There is another city very close to Kufa is Al-Basra. So I'm not a historian to talk about the social aspect of these two cities, but there's a tension in terms of fiqh and hadith. It seems Al-Basra in that time had a very important figure, faqih. His name Uthman al-Batti. Had a circle and shared his views with students. One of Abu Hanifa's students went to that circle, whose name is Yusuf bin Khalid al-Samti. Yusuf bin Khalid al-Samti used to be muhaddith, but accused by hadith scholars as a weak muhaddith scholar or a weak narrator. And it seems also Yusuf bin Khalid al-Samti was not that high in terms of communication with others. So he went to Uthman al-Batti circle, and anything he heard from that circle, he corrected. Said, nah, that's wrong, and this is the correct answer, and this based on Hanafi school, and based on our teacher, Abu Hanifa. And then the whole circle kicked him out. And when he went to the Kufa, he mentioned that to his colleague Zufar. And he said, okay, let me go to that place. Zufar went to that place and just sitting for days and listening to the circle. And trying to connect all of these rulings, ahkam fiqhiyya, with asl. What's the asl behind all of these rulings they are reducing? They said this is halal, this is haram, this, and then just like thinking, what's the asl, what's the canon, what's the foundation behind that? Once he traced and honed and understands the foundation, he tried to criticize all of the rulings based on this foundation. He said, okay, but you are in that ruling, you are contradicting the foundation. So there's a problem. If that's your foundation, there's a problem with the production of your foundations. Right? And they said to him, okay, so what's you have? So what you can bring to us? And he said, I have a better foundation, a better canon, a better asl. And here we can see al-asl. فإذا وقف على الأصل, once he catch asl, he trying to trace the discussion and change the discussion. And after listening to him, it seems based on this Hanafi manual, many people left Uthman al-Batti circle and went to Abu Hanifa circle. This is not important. The important how the word asl used in that place. So that means if you want to engage in fiqh, you need to have asl. So the room, it seems like a little bit hot. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. So bear with me. I see some faces. Okay. So then. This another story talking about usul, but from Shafi'i scholar, who is Al-Ala'i, wrote a book very important in terms of the history of قواعد فقهية, المجموع المذهب في قواعد المذهب. This is a very important book in terms, especially the introduction, very important in terms of the history of قواعد الفقهية. He said Abu Tahir al-Dabbas, the student of Abu Khazim bin Abd al-Hamid, Abu Tahir al-Dabbas studied Hanafi school, and he found all Hanafi school can be encapsulated in 17 asl. And it seems this the code of Hanafi school. Like someone in computer, he found the code, right? And then every day after Isha, he closed the mosque and repeating these 17 asl, just memorizing and reviewing these 17 asl. Some of the people here based on Al-Ala'i said a Hanafi scholar from a different city was aware of that figure at the Abbas. And then this Al-Harawi, Al-Hanafi, Al-Harawi, he went to the mosque of the Abbas, he prayed Isha. Al-Abbas was blind. He prayed Isha and then he just rubbed himself with a rug in the mosque, trying to memorize and to steal or to take these 17 asl from Abu Tahir al-Abbas. In a moment, Abu Sa'id al-Harawi made noise, and then Abu Tahir al-Abbas was aware of him and kicked him out from the mosque. This is based on a story by Al-Ala'i, who is Shafi'i. However, Ibn Nujaym al-Hanafi said the one who stole these 17 usul was Shafi'i, not Hanafi. So we have two incidents. The first one saying the one who took these 17 usul from Al-Abbas was Hanafi. Ibn Nujaym al-Hanafi said was Shafi'i. And then based on Shafi'i manuals, we found that most, or maybe the majority of Shafi'i fuqaha, Shafi'i historians, attribute Qawa'id Fuqahiyya to Shafi'i school. From medieval time, from Al-Izz bin Abd al-Salam and later. No one attribute that to Hanafi school in early time. Okay, but Al-Ala'i, as I said, mentioned Abu Tahir al-Abbas and Ibn Nujaym al-Hanafi. 5 minutes? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let me maybe go over this and then just like share with you with the meaning of asr with one example. So here Ibn Rushd في بداية المجتهد in the beginning of the book trying to explain one مسألة فقهية and said الحنفية هم أحفظ للأصول. That means Hanafiya more aware about usul. So when you discuss about any madhab, any hukm fiqhi, you need to be aware of Hanafi school because they understand the systematic, or maybe they follow a systematic way how to build ahkam fiqhiyya. And he said here, hum ahfazu lil-usul. So that means you need to be aware when you discuss with them. They are systematic, coherent, and consistent. So here, Kitab al-Hujjah, and I have different slides here to talk about these, the history of Kitab al-Hujjah and 20 tools of Shaybani Hujjah. This all 20 tools. This my reading of Kitab al-Hujjah is original work. I taught Kitab al-Hujjah and I found 20 tools, 20 non-Islamic tools to criticize Hadith. Again, these 20 tools encapsulated in 5 non-Islamic tools presented by Ibn Aban and then explained by Al-Jassas. And here is a chart. We need to do that. And here is a chart just telling us who is the one using that tool or another tool. And here mostly talking about Ibn Aban perspective. He has two main foundations, and this in English. And here's some examples of some early legal canons produced by Al-Shaybani in his book Al-Hujjah, talking about development of asl. So all of these canons produced by Shaybani, but some of them polished later, preserved, or removed, or replaced. So when we read Qawa'id Fuqahiyya later, mostly we trace them in Hujjah and early Hanafi writings, but not under Qawa'id, under the word asl. So the word asl is not used in Al-Hujjah, but used by Al-Jassas and used by Al-Dabusi. And then, I think that's the last one. Just, I share with you this one legal case. I think all of us are aware of this legal case. Reading after Imam in Salat al-Jama'ah. Right? We know that in any Hanafi mosque, the mosque is very quiet. Right? No Ameen, people not reading Al-Fatiha after Imam, and very quiet masjid. They are different from other masajid. So there is a chapter in Kitab al-Hujjah. Okay, he presented all of these hadiths, like people narrated. If you don't read Al-Fatiha, if you don't read Quran in Salat, your prayer will be invalid. Okay? These ahadith, 1 century after al-Shaybani, became canonicals, Sahih. In Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and very obvious. And al-Bukhari was very clear. Ma'moom, the follower, should read al-Fatiha in Salah. Al-Shaybani raised an asl without using the word asl. He said, okay, we have all of these hadiths, but if we rely on uprightness of narrator, we cannot, because all narrators are good. So let us trace what's the asl here. And he put a scenario. If someone enters the mosque and he join Imam while he is in ruku', is this rak'ah for him considered a rak'ah or not? If he did not or she did not read Al-Fatiha. And he said, all of you consider this a rak'ah. So then, you cannot say al-qira'ah, reading, recitation for ma'moom or recitation in general without specification is faridah, a duty. So then we need to understand. So salah here as a taxi. We cannot expect like 2 drivers in a taxi, right? So then we have different types of salah. So when we have imam, when we have salat jama'ah, we have a different asl. So that means, yes, recitation is obligation when you are praying by yourself, but not praying with jama'ah. Right? So all madhahib agreed with that, and they said, okay, Al-Bukhari, 1 century later, he wrote in his book, Sahih al-Bukhari, he put 2 titles. And one of the titles, Ma'moom should read in Salat al-Jama'ah. And he put the same hadith that al-Shaybani put. And he wrote a very important treatise, Al-Qira'ah Khalf al-Imam, and accused Abu Hanifa harshly, severely, that Abu Hanifa produced some opinions just to make the Ajam, the people of Khurasan, Transxonia, celebrate him. Like someone living in US, okay, we just want to give you some opinions that make your life easy, right? So he accused Abu Hanifa by this. And he said, this rak'ah not accepted. No, this rak'ah not accepted, and I don't agree with him. Just 5 figures in the history of Islam agreed with Al-Bukhari. All scholars, Shafi'i school and other schools, submit to that asl. So then, for Hanafi school, it seems very important when we read hadith, when we go to any chapter, it's not easy just like to read hadith without this systematic reading. So we need to put asl. And for Hanafi school, criticizing hadith based on narrators, not enough. So asl is very important and can make or maybe give us a key to build a systematic, coherent, and consistent reading of hadith. And I think that's enough for this job.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that, Issam. That's actually really informative and helpful. So before I go to the audience and see if there's any questions there, I just wanted to ask you a question which is interesting for me, which is that the early Hanafis seem to be judges and so forth. And then there is something taking place where we're starting to see judges of other madahibs. Is that because there's an amalgamation, like a mixing taking place between the Hanafis and the other schools? Or is it that the Hanafis have become so distinct that as a result they've become become a minority, and then the other schools have become more dominant at that time? Because in the late Ottoman period, you come back and everybody's Hanafi again.
Yeah, I'm talking about like the idea or being judged in the very sensitive time. So like becoming Hanafi in Ottoman period is like mostly not important as a formative period and talking about Hadith before the 6 canonical books. So that's why I'm focusing on that. So it seems for me it's very important to focus on the first 4 centuries. So how being in public places, courts, help you in understanding Islam because you are in the front line. Being on front line and you have a lot of hadith, and maybe 10,000 hadith, right? And high demand on the producing legal rulings. So you need a very comprehensive mind. If you rely on every single hadith and you consider every hadith as asl, will be a chaos. You have some hadith coming from Medina, some hadith coming from Kufa and others. And this is like the Hanafi way that they understand, okay, the hadith coming from Medina, okay, there is a credit for Medina, but fiqh is not from Medina. There are some Sahaba, like Ibn Mas'ud, and they moved to Kufa. So when I talk about this, like the decline and incline of judges in the region, mostly focusing on the center. So like Iraq, Bilad al-Sham, Egypt, not on the like marginalized places. So the center, maybe I think, telling a lot.
And just my second question, and then I'll open it up. Sorry. When we talk about today's contemporary context, and when you're teaching a student how to understand what we call context, so when you're teaching us now, I mean, a lot of teaching is text-based. You have text, and the teacher goes through the text. But here you're asking a particular form of comprehension that needs to be understood, right? The student, that is a very hard thing to teach in terms of. So when teaching the Hanafi school and emphasizing in the contemporary period about asal, how do you go about trying to highlight this point, which isn't in the other schools of thought in the same way? And it can make learning the Hanafi school quite difficult.
Yeah, so make Hanafi school wide, difficult, but also raising the bar. So you know that in any field, raising the bar is very important to make real students and real scholarship. So here that means producing knowledge in Muslim society is not accessible for anyone. And that's a chaos that we are witnessing right now. So I found that Hanafi school put everything in a correct track. Raising the bar to produce the knowledge in public places. You need to be aware of the societal aspect. You need to be aware of the difficulties of the text and the history, the social aspect of the history, and then to be a systematic when you produce any ruling. And that's a problem, like mostly why I came to this, because I found like a very big chaos right now in Muslim societies. People just like think that producing knowledge is very easy, and they found accessing to internet, Wi-Fi, WhatsApp, Twitter. Okay, I have this, and then I can share. No, this is just like a software you are seeing. You are using a software that not entail or give you a credit or maybe authority to provide or to produce knowledge. So producing knowledge here, hardware. Hardware that means you need to have all of these prerequisites until you can get in to produce knowledge.
So the Hanafi school is against ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is wonderful and it's great. Thank you very much. This is wonderful and I benefited tremendously. I have a question, a number of questions, but I remain very much to. First is the issue of the asal. Do we know the processes of crystallizing these, the concepts? And muscle, and how you come about with the one, or the 17 principles. What are the epistemic basis of this, the canon formation and the principle of the formation? And the related question is on, that we also raised, about the public spaces. This is obviously the time period before the madrasa. And would you please, comment on the public spaces? What are the terms that they use besides the court for public spaces? Thank you.
Yeah. So when I say public places, mostly I'm not talking about like mosques. I'm not talking about madrasa. Mostly something like related to courts. So courts here are, I think, the symbol of public places, and being on the front line to produce something can relieve the society in terms of maybe legal arguments, or maybe their hukuk, their rights, is very important. So this is like exactly like before madrasa, and I'm talking just like when I talk about Asad and Shaybani Hujjah, mostly in the second Islamic century, right, and before Shafi'i. But just let me go to the first question. You said how the Abbas came to these 17 Asad, to understand you correctly?
What's the seeds of, the end exactly?
This, I think, ongoing building is not coming like from nowhere. If we read Shaybani Hujjah and we read all debates in Hanafi biographical dictionaries between Abu Hanifa and his disciples, it seems not. It's very obvious that Abu Hanifa did his best in building all these usul in the mind of his students. And this is not coming from one incident. So Abu Hanifa always like asking, okay, after building any hukum, so what's the asl? And some students said, okay, this asl. And he said, another said, I found a better asl. And this coming from just like stories we found in anecdotes, we found in biographical dictionaries. So these biographical dictionaries support furu' genre. When we open Kitab al-Asl, the Muhammad Hassan Shaybani 13 volumes, edited a very great edition, we found that's very clear. And then we found it in Al-Hujjah. And then we found it in the writings of Isa bin Aban, preserved by Abu Bakr al-Jassas. And then we found it in Al-Tahawi, Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, but in a different technical terms, another. Right? And then with Al-Jassas, and again, Al-Asl, or Tahkim al-Usul, and then Al-Dabusi, Usul al-Qiyas. He used Usul al-Qiyas. So it seems that the society is vibrating and very active. There is no any rupture, epistemological rupture in terms of understanding this process. So it seems for them to understand fiqh, to go to that field, is not to understand or to memorize kutub fiqhiyya or to memorize rulings. It's not to say, okay, this is halal and haram. And just to give you one anecdote written in the story of Abu Yusuf al-Qadi, he said something like very interesting. He said, it's very easy for me to forget Quran, but not easy for me to forget fiqh. What does that mean? So fiqh for him is a process. Is something like coming with pedagogical acquisition. It is not just something he memorized. Okay? So that means, as we maybe ulama al-tasawwuf said, so there is a difference between ilm al-yaqeen wa ayn al-yaqeen wa haqq al-yaqeen. So ilm al-yaqeen, to know about something, right? Ayn al-yaqeen, to see that, think that you know. But haqq al-yaqeen, to practice that thing that you saw and that you know. So what Hanafi did, they practiced that. It is not just like memorize, and that's what we need to do right now in our schools. To produce fuqaha. To produce fuqaha is not to memorize mutun, is not to memorize ahkam fiqhiyya, but to make this discussion, this argument, how we get to know that, from where, what's the tools, and what's the connection between this hukum and that hukum. And I think what Hanafi school, the uniqueness about Hanafi schools, they produce that type of process. It is not just like reducing ahkam fiqhiyya. Wallahu a'lam.
Any other questions? No? Okay. In that case, I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much for Issam for being here today. I really appreciate his time and effort, and everybody online who's here. Dr. Issam is in the Istanbul area, so if you do want to get hold of him, I'm sure you can find him in the Suleymaniye neighborhood and sit down with him and talk to him about his talk or anything else that makes you comfortable. Next week we have another talk, which let me just put up for you here. So that we know. So next week's talk is, there's two talks next week. There's one on Monday, which is by Professor Muhammad Fadl from University of Toronto, which will be chaired by Professor Sami Ayub, Assistant Professor Sami Ayub, and the title is Maslaha's Place in Sunni Political Thought, so another continuation of that. And then on Wednesday, we will have lecturer Tahsin Khan from Dar es Salaam in Chicago. We'll be doing a book discussion on a Sunni apologetic of the original creation of Adam alayhi salam. Okay, so those will be the two talks that will be happening next week. Please do try to attend in person if you can. If not, once again, we know what the weather is like when you have you online. And thank you very much for being here today. Assalamu alaikum.